welcomes. We are going to go ahead and record this meeting in case anyone wasn't able to make it. They'll be able to watch it and really get the information as well. So you'll see that notice here clicking across your screen in a second. We're going to start actually with just a quick welcome. Nicole, did you want to get us started and just say a couple of words?
I would love to. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Look forward to having a good session today. I'm not sure if the other key partners are on here, but if they are, they could please speak up. James or Carrie. Matt, I know you're on here.
Carrie is not on, but I just want to say welcome to the 4th learning session and really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you, James.
Great.
Go ahead, Matt. Thank you.
And I want to echo that welcome. One of the things today, we're coming together at a time where we've made an amazing amount of progress in a very short period of time. And we're also coming together at a challenging context. We're in the middle of the Omicron surge. It makes life on campuses very challenging, life in our communities exceptionally challenging as well. And we know also that really does impact, mental health concerns and the things that we are working to improve as part of this project. So it probably goes without saying, but I know that, it's a time when we all probably are overloaded, overcommitted, and I just want to recognize your commitment, and also the fact that that being part of this meeting probably comes at a cost of other things that are on your plate. We're grateful, and we're really glad that you're here. When we a couple of quick things. I know it came out in the email earlier this week, but the agenda for today, the slide deck, and meeting materials are all on the Google Drive. That is there on the screen, and I might ask Amanda or Laura to go ahead and put that in the chat box as well. Today we're going to do a few things. We're going to talk about really where we are, where we're headed. We are going to focus a lot on some of our successes that we've had along the way, some of our emerging impacts. We're going to focus on some of the challenges that you might be experiencing or might experience in the future, and really sort of explore some of the best practices to work through those. We'll introduce Deliverable 4, which really does focus on some of those challenges. And we'll also discuss some resources to support your work. And really, this also is a chance for all of us to work together a little bit. We'll have an activity with some breakout rooms that allow all of you to work with each other, and also to work a bit with the Ocam coaches, who you're going to meet here in a second. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it to Nicole to go ahead and introduce the Ocam coaches. And Nicole, I can stop sharing if that's easier, or leave the slide up.
Thanks, Matt. The slide up is fine. So as we go into the next phase of this project, Julie and I have been working with the Ohio Coaching and Mentoring Network, which is a part of the training hub, which is located within Prevention First. So as we move through January and February, and then actually March as well, April 1st will begin phase 2. So what we're going to do today is we've invited the coaches to come along onto the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the day with us today. So they're going to be in your breakout sessions. We'll give them an opportunity to introduce yourself to them, and then also have an opportunity for them to introduce themselves. Julie, did you want to say anything before we give the coaches an opportunity to say hello?
No, I think you summed it up well. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to call out the first one I see, and that is Christy Valentini Lachner.
Hi, everyone. I am Christy Valentini Lachner. I am a senior partner at Prevention First, located in Norwood, Ohio. I have been in the field of prevention for 20 years, and I just celebrated my 5th year here at Prevention First. I have had the wonderful experience on working on projects like the Partnership for Success and the state incentive grants. Did a lot of work up in Butler County, and I see some familiar faces on here from Miami and some familiar faces from UC, and I'm excited to be a part of this. Hi, Rebecca. And I just think that this is, what the work you're doing is so important and it's wonderful. And I'm glad that I get to be a part of phase 2. So looking forward to doing the work.
Christy, while we have a second, can you just give a brief overview of Ocam? I introduced it as part of the training hub under Prevention First, but just as we begin to introduce the other coaches, I just want them to have more of an overview of what Ocam is.
Absolutely. So several years ago, the federal grant came down through what we call the SPIFSIG, the State Incentive Grant. And Derek and Chip were definitely a part of that, where we were working on selected 18 to 25-year-old populations. There were about 13 of us across the state. We worked with Matt, we worked with Dr. Raffel to really help collect strong data, to find a problem of practice, to focus on a group that not necessarily was resource rich or resource heavy. That opportunity led to this second round of funding, which was the Ohio Strategic Prevention Framework Partnerships for Success. And in that, these communities were given money to work specifically on the reduction of the abuse of prescription drugs or high-risk drinking. Those communities that were originally SPIFSIG grantees were given the opportunity to come on and to help coach and assist the communities that were funded for the Ohio PFS project. And as that group came together, we recognized that there was a plethora of individuals in the prevention field that had experience, that had knowledge, that are excellent coaches that weren't part of the SPIFSIG or the SPIF-PFS, but needed to be a part of the Ohio Coaching and Mentoring Network. So we cast a little bit wider and tapped some individuals across the state, and they brought in their expertise on grant writing, on strategic planning, on working with boards, on working with coalitions, preventing problem gambling. So we have a core group of 13 individuals that bring wonderful experience, wonderful knowledge, wonderful talent to the table, that work individually with individuals, that work on organizational levels, that work on community levels, and then have a lot of experience working on all different sorts of grants and all different sorts of objectives. So we are a growing group, but you'll see that most of the individuals that are here as coaches have at least 15 to 20 years experience in this field in different areas, but have very specified talents and gifts. Nicole, would you say that that is a quick encapsulation of 15 years?
Yes, great job. Okay, so the first person I'd like to introduce you to, besides Christy, who is wonderful, obviously, is Andrea Hoff. And if I remember correctly, today is Andrea's birthday. So happy birthday, Andrea.
Thank you. I didn't know you were going to say that, but I'll take it all day long. So thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. Like Nicole said, my name is Andrea Hoff. I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of this really exciting initiative. I've been in the field of prevention for almost 27 years because, I'm so young. I started when I was at the age of 2. Been doing this for a long while, have really played a lot of different roles in the field of prevention, everything from school-based direct services to working with adults to doing coalition work, doing workforce development, that sort of thing. I worked for about 12 years in the nonprofit sector doing prevention work. Then I moved to the public sector where I still did prevention work. And for the last, it's been now 2+ years, I went out on my own and started my own training and consulting company to help prevention people, like good people like all of you who want to do good prevention work, where I get to work with you to help build your capacity to do good prevention work at the local level with the good folks that you touch in your local communities and in your lives. So I love to do that. I'm currently working with coalitions across the state of Ohio. So if we talk about specialties, I teach a 45-hour curriculum on grant writing. I teach a 45-hour curriculum on human resources management. And in my business, we do all of that, HR work as well as grant writing, but then we also do a lot of strategic planning, logic modeling, needs assessment, gap analyses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a little bit about me, and I look forward to working with all of you. I'm excited to really get in down and deep with the 2 colleges and universities that I will be working with.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks again for spending your birthday with us too. Ashley, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as part of your new role at You Thrive?
Yeah, sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Mack. I am an independent consultant with You Thrive Training and Consulting. So I get to work very closely with Miss Andrea, who you just heard from. And prior to joining, which just happened a couple months ago, I worked heavily in the public sector. So I have about 5 years of experience in the prevention realm. So not quite, the 27 years of experience, but the time that I have worked in the prevention field, it has been in the public sector and really helping agencies who are receiving public dollars to improve their prevention processes to ensure that they're doing best practice work. And then within that, doing a lot of coalition work, supporting their strategic prevention framework processes, and then working with many other entities as well. So prior to getting into the prevention field, I did work at other area nonprofits and doing a lot of project management and things like that. So I'm excited to be here today. And even though I might have just 5 years of experience, I've been mentored by many of the other Ocam coaches that have many more years of experience. So I feel like I am I've been poured into by many individuals. So I feel like my knowledge base is up to snuff, if you will say. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Ashley. The next person I can see on my screen is Chip, or also known as William Livesey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Chip Livesey. I have been part of the Ocam training network since 2016 at least. And you've heard a little bit about that from Christy and Andrea on the work that we've been doing there. I've been in the field of prevention for 37 years. My background is also as a licensed social worker. I worked for the public health department in Columbus. I have done work with the Institute for Educational Leadership out of Washington, D.C., which works with workforce development with people with disabilities, and for the Institute for Human Services doing trainings for the child welfare system. I've also been part of 3 coalitions over the course of my career. Some of them more successful than others, but one that I was really proud of that, ended over 20 years ago, and you see remnants of what was developed still in place in Franklin County. So I think I have a few things to offer. Can't be as specific as Andrea was, but I'm looking forward to working with Rio Grande and Shawnee.
Thanks, Chip. Derek?
Good afternoon, everyone. Derek Longmire. I've been in prevention since I was 12, so just coming up on 30 years of being involved from the very youth level, doing schoolwork that then led to, or high school work that led to countywide work and then statewide work. From there, graduating from Ohio State, moved back home for a couple of years, working in direct service, doing coalition development in Hancock County, and then missed Columbus and all that is Columbus and not quite ready for Findlay life. So moved back significant amount of time ago and worked at Ohio Parents for Drug Free Youth that became Drug Free Action Alliance, which is now Prevention Action Alliance. Spent a little over 10 years there. Through that time, and as SPIF-SIG was developing, was part of the leadership team there and started my consulting company at that time. Went full-time consulting about 7 years ago, and then transitioned back about 2 years ago to full-time executive director with Problem Gambling Network of Ohio, but still continuing with the consulting work that I do, because just looking at professional development and having better professionals in all aspects or connections to prevention is one of my passions, and this gets to be my fun job. So just that's a little bit about me. So if you got questions about gambling, I'm your guy.
Thank you, Derek. And I believe the last coach on here today is Alicia Longmire. And Alicia, I know you're not going to turn your computer on, but if you could just give a brief introduction, that would be great.
Yes, I do apologize for my camera. Thank you so much, Nicole. My name is Alicia Longmire, and I am also Ocam coach. I have been a part of Ocam going on about 2 years. I'm also a part of Prevention First. So I have some unique experiences with community mobilization of urban communities, particularly. I did most of my career, and the start of my career in prevention started at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where I ended that's about 22 years. In 2019 was my last year there. And then I became an Ocam coach shortly after that. And I will say that I'm interested in helping any way I can. Also, I'm just delighted to be part of this group as we do support you in your learning community. And this is kind of my first time really dealing with prevention at a collegiate level. So I'm super excited because I know I can learn as well. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here, and I look forward to meet you all. When my camera does work, you will get to see me. But until then, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Alicia. Julie, did you want to add anything else before I turn it back over to Matt?
Just a final thank you to the Ocam coaches. You guys will continue to learn more about them in phase 2 of this project, which, sometimes April sounds far away, but we know it'll be here before we know it. So thanks for jumping on board, and you'll get to talk with them a little bit more in your breakout rooms. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Great.
Matt?
Thanks so much, everyone. Before we move ahead, any questions at all for the coaches, for Nicole or Julie? All right, I'm going to reshare my screen real quick. And we're going to move into the next section here, which is really focused on really brainstorming some of our successes and exploring some impacts. And this is particularly important as we start to come to the end of phase 1. We went from 0 to 100 miles an hour, and we've really come so far in a short period of time that we haven't had a chance to stop and pause sometimes and think about what we have accomplished and the impacts we've had. Today, we are really thrilled to have Dr. Gavin Luther with us. He is the Managing Director of the University Alliance from UW-Madison. He has deep experience working with campus community partnerships. And he's going to lead us through this part of our meeting today as we think about our successes and think about some challenges as well. Dr. Luther, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more so you know why you might want to, why I have a little bit of cred, but I still have a lot to learn, but I have some experiences. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, this is just kind of my introductory slide here. You go to the next one. Basically, who am I? I used to be a Southerner. I was born in Virginia, and now I went to the North, and now I'm a Midwesterner. I went from Tennessee, Virginia to Tennessee, to Buffalo, New York, to now Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm glad to be here. I got my degrees at Virginia Tech in Public and Urban Affairs, my master's degree in Higher Ed Administration from University of Tennessee, Knoxville, my PhD in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies from University at Buffalo. I have basically, I also worked at the United Way of Greater Knoxville. I worked at the Howard Baker Center for Public Policy at University of Tennessee. So I've spent about 15 years doing campus community partnerships. I have some teaching experience, undergraduate and graduate students about community engagement, city management, city improvement, kinds of stuff, and how universities can be involved in improving cities and the quality of life in neighborhoods. That really also leads me into my scholarly work. I'm really interested in the role that universities can play in improving social conditions and trying to right the historical injustices that in some cases universities themselves have caused, and also how universities can improve schools and neighborhoods at the same time, while also improving their own practices and their own scholarship. And I used to be the director of Wisconsin Campus Compact, which is the largest professional association of campus community partnership and community engagement professionals in the United States. And I ran the Wisconsin chapter. And now my job is basically to broker local government partnerships. So cities, towns, villages, counties who are interested in working with UW-Madison. So that's a little bit about me and why I think I have something to offer on the subject of campus community partnerships. All right, so the next slide. Really what I'm going to be talking about is strengths and impacts, and then reflecting on opportunities for improvement for your particular partnerships. This section right here is going to be on the strengths and impacts. And then I'll pause and we'll do an kind of a breakout activity, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the challenges. If you go to the next slide, I don't know if you all are familiar with the concept of appreciative inquiry, but I'm a big fan of thinking about like what's going right instead of just focusing on what's going wrong, along the lines of asset-based community development. There's a particular reflection methodology that I really like called ripple effects mapping. Now, this is often something that you use after a partnership or collaborative has been formed, taking time to think about like, hey, you dropped something in the middle of the pond, and let's see what ripples kind of came from what you've done. So what we're really going to be focusing on here is kind of what makes you feel a sense of accomplishment at your partnership, even in its early stages. What have been some of the initial impacts of your work? I'm going to give you some ways to think about that in a second. I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to be like, we, I don't know, saved one person's life or something. It could just be new relationships that we've started, learning more about your impact area that you hope to even expand on, engaging new people in this work, maybe even changing your own institutional culture, asking questions that have never been asked before at your institution, making them think hard. And then also maybe thinking about what difference has your partnership made in individuals, families, communities, local and regional environments and ecologies. The next slide, actually, if you can go to that, this is maybe to kind of just think bigger and broader about different ways or different levels of impact that you might be thinking about. And I don't want this to intimidate you. I just really want this to be kind of food for thought as you go into your breakout groups. A lot of times we focus on change of individuals. This is very much our culture, our society, like what are people doing differently now that they've had your intervention? But there are also organizational impacts, interpersonal impacts, community impacts, and perhaps even public policy impacts that you have. This is probably nothing new to you all, but I just want you all to be thinking about, hey, we don't just need to focus on the individual impacts, but also like, hey, maybe there are some new interprofessional networks or interpersonal networks that have been spawned by our partnership that didn't exist before. And then there's also the community capital. So that was kind of the social ecological model. If you all are probably familiar with Yuri Bronfenbrenner is kind of the grandfather of the social ecological model. Then there's also the community capitals framework. Thinking about community ecosystems, there's everything from, built capital, kind of the buildings and physical spaces that you have, natural capital, something in your environment, literally, I mean, what could be the assets that you could be leveraging outside in your actual environment. Cultural capital, different people with different backgrounds, different ways of looking at things, human capital, the individual, social capital, connections between people, political capital, of course, the connections that we have to kind of get things done as a society and actually put that into law. And of course, financial capital is kind of money and resources. So as you go to the next slide, this is just a little heuristic kind of device here, just a little picture, something that helps you think about it. You know, you think about your programming right in the middle. What do you do? What is the program? But then next level out is what changes or outcomes have occurred in what context. I've given you a couple of contexts to think about. How did those changes occur? You know, what were the mechanisms to get us there? And then ultimately, like, what impact has your program had on different kinds of community capital? So you think about, you know, the social ecological, kind of that second ring out, and then the broader community capital, even bigger on the outskirts. So with that, I think I'm going to be turning this back over to Amanda, I think, to help lead our activity.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I'm going to put a link to the activity in the chat. And you can go to the next slide, Matt. Thanks. So basically what we're going to be doing is splitting up into 3 breakout rooms. And this time we're going to have y'all just choose your room based on the partnership that you're in. And Ocam coaches, I listed you below what groups will go in as well. And basically on that link that I sent, it's a link to a document, and there's a couple questions for each of these groups to answer, and you can do as bullet points and work collaboratively together. So I'll open up those breakout rooms now, and it'll be about a 10-minute activity.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for being part of that activity. As we got a chance, and thank you as well for just your patience with technology. You know, sometimes it does go a little bit sideways. So thanks for adapting and moving into Word documents and things like that as needed. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Luther here in a second, but what I think we were all most struck by is that, you know, we've gone so far in such a short period of time, and it's really neat to see the impacts that you all are seeing. And I think it just is a testament to your hard work and the progress. So Gavin, I'm happy to reshare the screen if you'd like, or let you say a few words.
No, you can definitely share the screen, and we can dive right into the presentation. I'm hoping that we get some thoughts. It's lovely to see most of your faces. I was starting to. You all were reminding me of the times where I was teaching students that don't like to turn on their cameras, and so it's lovely to see you know, so many people's faces. So makes me feel like I'm, you know, kind of in the real world. All right, so something that the PIRE team and this group, the Rise and Thrive group, has asked me to do is just come in and talk a little bit about where the research kind of identifies the major challenges that community university partnerships tend to face. And these are kind of loosely built around, there was a gathering of all the experts in the field at the Wingspread Conference Center in Racine, Wisconsin. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Wingspread facility. It's a fancy facility designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And they had these small conferences of experts in all different kinds of fields. And they had one on community engagement in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they brought researchers in and all this kind of stuff. And also the Community Campus Partnerships for Health. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, CCPH. They have been working on kind of principles of good practice for community engagement based on many years of work in community partnerships. And also some more recent stuff that I think is not as well documented in the literature, but is still out there. So this is, I don't know, I guess I just want you all to know, like, these, I didn't just like brainstorm these one day. These were actually documented in the field and in the research. And I wanted to share some with you in hopes that it might be able to spur some good thoughts about your next deliverable that you're going to be doing. And so you can kind of identify these and then start to work on how do we address them? How do we start to overcome some of these challenges? And I'm also prepared to have some of that discussion today if you all want to dive into that. So, all right, so if you want to go to the next slide, these 4 areas, I'm going to break them down one by one. All right, first of all, design of the partnership. And this is something that, you know, perhaps you've already done, perhaps you're still doing it. Actually, sometimes I think when we think of design of partnership, you think of that as like a one-time event, but actually this is kind of an ongoing, everything needs to be constantly co-constructed throughout the life cycle of the partnership. So I'll just give you a couple of common challenges that have been identified, and these may or may not resonate with you. First of all, there's no shared vision. There's nobody who's actually sat down and said, what ultimately do we want to do with this partnership? You might have like an individual little thing or like, yeah, a vague notion, but it's like, yeah, we should work together on this. And like nobody really has sat down and thought about exactly what we're trying to accomplish and where are we going? Not just what are these little pieces that we're doing together? What is this little program that we're doing? But ultimately, what are we trying to accomplish in the world, in our community, you know, kind of broader vision. Sometimes groups have misaligned values. So, you know, when universities and communities come together, and communities of all kinds of sorts, nonprofit organizations, neighborhood organizations, schools, even sometimes, you realize that you might have different kinds of values. So, for instance, you know, you all, universities oftentimes have a value of doing research and of lifelong learning and all this kind of stuff. Whereas some community organizations don't really, they're not thinking about that kind of stuff because they haven't really had to do research or they haven't done that. That hasn't really been part of their culture and what really they value on paper. And, you know, sometimes organizations out in the community are very explicit about, for instance, racial justice or social justice. Universities are not comfortable putting that out there as a very clear stated value. Some universities are, some universities are not. So sometimes there are misaligned values. Mutual benefits are not clear. I think this is very clear for anybody who's ever done partnership work is everybody's got to be getting something out of the partnership. So if you know, if only one group is benefiting, say researchers are getting great research, but the community is actually not getting anything back from that research, telling us what we should learn from it, then that's going to not make the partnership last very long because only one side is getting something out of it as opposed to the other, as opposed to both partners getting something out of it. There's also no clear definition of success. You know, this goes alongside vision, but you know, I think it's a very specific one. We're not exactly sure what, you know, at the end of the day, are we going to say this was a success or not a success? Sometimes you just like partners just don't have conversations about future assessment. It's not necessarily clear. Of course, I don't want to give you a whole lecture about outputs versus outcomes, but you might be saying, hey, we want to serve 10 people. But that doesn't necessarily mean like what changes are we looking for in those people. So there's no clear definition of success. And sometimes that means that partnerships will drag on indefinitely. And sometimes people go, why are we here again? Well, we didn't really have a good clear definitions of success. So it just kind of keeps trudging along and everybody kind of looks up 10 years later and they're like, why are we here again? Or even 1 year later, 6 months later. And then finally, the one that I'll mention here is lack of documentation. Really, people just aren't writing things down. There's no clear memorandum of understanding. There's no clear contract. And this is something that I see oftentimes kill partnerships left and right. I mean, this will really make you fade fast if things are not written down and you cannot point back to say, oh, this is what we agreed to. All right, we can go to the next bucket of challenges. Building collaborative relationships. This perhaps is where maybe more people are. Again, there's a lot of people are always constantly designing and that needs to happen. But building collaborative relationships is another big bucket. So difficulty establishing trust and respect. Sometimes this is something that I hear community partners talk a lot about, that university professors show up and they tell us how smart they are. But sometimes they don't really ask us, what are our opinions? Love you, academics. Absolutely love you all. You're doing great stuff out in the world, but sometimes it can be really hard to establish trust and respect if you come in and, you really flaunt your degree. And it's actually kind of weird. I don't say this often, but Matt was introducing me as Dr. Luther, and I get the whole credential thing, whatever. But I don't even put in my email signature that I'm a PhD. Because I've had community partners say like, well, I was a little intimidated when I found out you're a PhD. So I don't even put that out there very much. Anyway, so trust, respect. This can also just be, initial conversations. People were on their phones, they weren't really showing up to meetings, just all this kind of stuff. So, okay. Scope of the project is too narrow or too broad. This is, this can also really put a damper on partnerships, is if, all we're doing is right here, we only want to serve those 10 people, or like, we want to transform Cincinnati, or we want to transform Rio or something like that. Like, how, in what way, versus too narrow, just being like, okay, well, we served those 10 people, mission accomplished. Are we done now? So there needs to be some kind of like, kind of midpoint of, something that's a little bit, broader than the 10 people, but a little bit narrower than, we want to transform the community. Okay, project is disorganized. Organizational norms are not clear or followed. There's nobody really keeping track of things. There are no minutes at meetings. People are constantly kind of wondering like, what was discussed at that last one? Who said that they were going to do this? We didn't really have a tracking sheet. We don't really have order on this kind of stuff. That can also really be kind of a buzzkill on partnerships, because it's just not clear who's in control. Is there a project leadership team? Is there an advisory board? We're not sure, because nobody's documented stuff and nobody's organized it. There's also another one that I think is an interesting one. No clear dynamic champion for the partnership. This can kind of actually cut both ways, is if you become too reliant on that one person, and if that one person leaves, that can spell disaster for your partnership, because, I don't know, Jamal was the person who everybody looked to, and Jamal left for California somehow, got a new job. But really, if there's not someone in the organization or in, within your ranks that really is a champion for the partnership, hopefully it's somebody with some level of positional authority, somebody who can kind of control resources or who's supervising multiple staff members. But yeah, that sometimes can really be another buzzkill for these partnerships. Another one is if staff are not prepared to do the work that is necessary. I was just talking with Julie. I have a lot of experience in community schools. So this is kind of wraparound supports for kids and in schools, and also how can the school serve the entire neighborhood. If staff are not prepared to, interact with neighborhoods and communities and kids and be kind of a boundary spanner, or if somebody who's in charge of doing the attendance check-in program or the mental health check-in, check-out program, they haven't been through formal training, that's not going to work. No surprise. So if staff aren't prepared, that's another thing. And you might kind of think like, oh, duh, of course we know all these things. You'd be surprised at still, it's like, hey, we have a warm body. Can you do that check-in, check-out program? Okay, great. And then the person's like, yeah, I want to be a team player, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So I don't want to say anything and say that they're not prepared. So it's just something you want to be checking in on time in and time out. Also, the last one is power imbalances among staff, faculty, students. I think I even saw that there were some postdoctoral fellows who were engaged in some of these partnerships. And sometimes that postdoc may or may not be empowered by their PIs or by their, faculty members that they work under. Sometimes students feel as though they are kind of, not valued, or community partners are like, all the leadership team is made up of university people. Why is that? We don't have power in this relationship? Wait a minute. So that's another one. So this whole bucket of building collaborative relationships is something everybody needs to look out for. The next one. Okay, managing and sustaining a partnership. This is the biggest bucket, of course, because it takes so much to manage and sustain partnerships. So if the partnership is not integrated into the mission of our respective institutions, another way of saying that is you don't have institutional support. Say it's too far out of your zone, but like, hey, it was a grant opportunity and we had to apply for the grant opportunity because our people told us that we had to have grants. And so we ended up getting into this, even though it wasn't really in our mission. That will also doom a partnership to failure. And also within your academic department, if people don't value community engaged work, chances are you're not going to get a lot of support. And so therefore you're always going to be that little outlier over there. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, Amanda, she's the one who does everything with community partners. But Amanda has no official, like power in our organization. And so it's not really incorporated into the mission of the organization. So that can really be a problem spot here. There are no clear processes to handle communication, decision-making, and change management. I would kind of underscore communication here. This is where what I struggle with in my daily life right now, managing partnerships between cities, counties, towns, and villages and UW-Madison, is that if there's no clear communication, like, hey, we check in weekly, we have a communications norm to say, hey, every Friday we send a list of questions, we send a check-in, we send an update, whatever it is. But also that can go to decision-making and managing change if something happens. If there are not clear processes or kind of norms that govern these things, that's really gonna set you back in this partnership. Similarly, if there's no clear point of contact, again, you might think, duh, who wouldn't have a clear point of contact? I work in community engagement. I know that happens all the time. And somebody will say, oh, I thought Jack was the contact. It's like, I thought Ebony was the contact. It's like, well, if it's not clear and a person doesn't know that they're the point of contact, I've actually had it to where community partners were assigned to be the project lead and the point of contact without their consent. They just happened to be assigned to this project. And it's like, then I email them and they're like, who the heck are you? Why are you emailing me? It's like, oh, I thought this was all kind of ironed out. So yeah, I mean, this is something that we have struggled with and we continue to struggle with. Also, if there's no clear evaluation on process or outcome, I think it is equally as important to evaluate process as well as outcome, or assessment, any kind of assessment of progress. If there's no clear plan for that, that can also kind of destroy a partnership, because at some point, I mean, good on you all for already starting to think about assessment. Matt, Laura, Julie, and Amanda, and the whole team, like, we need to be thinking about assessment early, because at some point, someone will say, so what are you doing? How do you know you're going to make an impact? And then if you go, we don't know, then you know what? It's probably not going to last as a partnership, because eventually people will be asking and then you have no answers. And so they won't fund you anymore, or, whatever it is. Also, no celebration of successes. Since I'm kind of a natural optimist, I love seeing this one on the, on the list here, is if all we do is chug through and like, do, we got things done. But if nobody ever stops to say, hey, good job, people get demoralized. Surprise, surprise. I mean, anybody who's ever managed human relationships, you understand that if you don't take a minute and say, wow, this is really great, look at what we've done, then you're probably not going to be too motivated and feel very valued. So this is something that can also doom a partnership. Also, partnership can be too, oh my gosh, I'm going too long on this stuff. So I will try to speed up here. Partnership is too inflexible, can evolve based on new learning. Staff turnover, can't really do much about it, but you got to have a plan for it. And then sometimes even disagreement over facilities use, like, hey, where are we having the meeting? Whatever. So this is an important thing. All right, next slide. This is the last bucket. And we will not have as much to say about this, but cultural equity and inclusion is a bucket that I think is not as well represented in the literature, but certainly happens. And I can tell you head on, like I've seen this happen. So if there's overt discrimination among staff, you know, maybe staff are really totally unprepared to deal with, I'm going to call them diverse populations, but you might call them people with marginalized identities, whether it's gender, you know, race, equity, you know, military status, whatever it is. Therefore, you know, people start to just flat out, you know, discriminate to where it's like, yeah, we don't really care who our program participants are. We're just going for the lowest hanging fruit. You know, and sometimes equity in hiring is a big deal. Like if we're not really paying attention to making sure that the people who we hire are not reflective of the community that we're working in, you know, that this can be open discrimination. Also microaggressions. I've definitely had it before where students and or faculty come into a community and they are microaggressed against, you know, or similarly, people at the university, you know, say perhaps it's a staff member or, you know, a faculty member who's just not really sensitive to things and makes really offhand comments that can be taken very offensively by some community partners. This just happened to one of our community partners in our university year program. We had a group of community partners who told one of the Native nations that, like, how come you're not investing more in a particular program? And it's like, well, we've been dealing with COVID and we're trying to save our people's lives. How dare you tell us what we should invest our money in? This kind of microaggression, it was actually a pretty overt aggression. Yeah, it really harmed the partnership and we're in repair mode right now. Also just a lack of focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you're just not even thinking about that's not on your radar, that's not good for the partnership. And just flat out structural racism. If there are things that are structurally holding you back from doing the work and yeah, I mean, are kind of built in power structures and systems that have been in place well before you. If you are just kind of blind to the structural racism and you're not trying to address the root causes of the structural racism, chances are the structural racism is going to win out because it's structural. So anyway, those are the four big buckets. I want to pause there. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen at this point. Okay, we can see you. Well, I can see some of you. I have a couple of slides that are after that around opportunities for improvement around power sharing and building relationships, just in case there were like crickets in the room and nobody has anything to discuss. But I wanted to just stop there and see if anyone wants to like raise their hand, put something in the chat, ask questions that are clarifying. My intention is not to spend the rest of this time solving all these problems. My intention is just to kind of see like where you are, what are you thinking, and the next deliverable will kind of dive more into detail around solving the issues. But yeah, where are your minds at this point? Yeah, thanks, Alexis. I think that's part of the reason why I'm kind of working with you all is to let you know you aren't the first ones dealing with challenges. There are many, many, many documented challenges and opportunities that are documented in the literature around community university partnerships. So good, Alexis. I'm glad you're normalized in your thinking here, because you are definitely not alone. And let me tell you, like, as a practitioner of community engagement for 15 years, I have like either seen or actively like participated in some of these bad things, even though we sometimes knew better. We're like, oh yeah, we didn't write that down. Oh yeah, we didn't make it clear. I mean, I'm telling you about challenges that I'm dealing with like right now in the moment. And it's like, and I know all this stuff, but still it's like, we even ask the question, you know, like communications, for instance, we ask the question, like, who's going to be the point of contact? What is going to be the, you know, the schedule? And like, people will go, we'll figure that out when the semester happens. And then it doesn't ever happen. And it's like, oh, but how come, you know, and then it's like, somebody didn't follow up and ask, like, how come we didn't get that, you know, ironed out? Anyway, so it's like, you know, it's okay, breathe, you're okay, you're doing okay. We just need good reminders, and then be like, oh yeah, let's like work on that one, because that's the most pressing one, or whatever it is. Other thoughts or questions or comments or concerns? Or maybe things that you know of that I didn't even, that you didn't see on the list. I do want to be sensitive, Laura. I don't know, Matt, how much more time that we have for this portion.
We've got about 20 minutes left for the
okay, for
the whole meeting, actually.
The whole meeting. Okay.
Yep.
And this could take up the rest of the meeting if need be.
We got a few things we probably should cover on it. We should cover just by way of kind of closing some threads and talking about that deliverable.
Yeah,
well.
The next deliverable. Right. I want to make sure everybody's clear on that, but. Okay, we have thumbs up. I don't want to be the person who's like not comfortable with silence and like letting people just letting it sit, you know, before you actually have something to say. But I also don't want to like let it go so long that we're like, okay, we clearly have nothing else to say, let's move on. You know, I want to find a nice middle.
I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate that, Nicole. I mean, part of the reason why I love working in community university partnerships is that I feel like I'm constantly learning new things. And so there was a really landmark publication that came out in the mid 2000s called Unheard Voices. And it was by a couple of people at University of Wisconsin-Madison, actually. Randy Stoker and Beth Tryon wrote this book about basically bringing community partner voices to the front in service learning partnerships. And it was like the first time that anyone had like documented community partner quotes about how hard it is to work with universities, because we like to think universities are so great, we have all these resources. And it turns out sometimes we're kind of a pain in the neck to deal with. And the community partners were finally asked, like, what's it like when somebody asks you to work on university projects? And then it was just like, bleh, you know, like it all came out, and they wrote a whole book about it. So if anybody's ever curious about that, anyway, the point is that was like a whole new section of inquiry that came from community partner wisdom. And now we have like a whole new, you know, kind of body of knowledge around, you know, kind of critical community perspectives on community university partnerships. So that's the reason why I'm saying that, is because you all in here might very well know and have tapped into some of the challenges that are just not well documented in the literature. Does not mean that they do not actually affect your partnership. So yeah, I mean, if anybody has anything that they'd like to add, or just say like, hey, based on my experience, I've seen this happen, I didn't see it on your list, like somebody should look into that, you know, or whatever it is. And maybe we'll get more from the deliverable that you all created. You'll have a chance to really reflect on it. But yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do, since we've got about 15 minutes left in our meeting today, is the slide deck is up on the Google Drive, and Gavin's got some great suggestions for ways to share power for opportunities for improvement. And what I would say is we probably do want to transition over to the deliverable if that works. But if we, if as you review that, you've got questions, or you want to leverage Gavin's experience, you can reach out, and we'll make that happen. We'll figure out a way to support that and make that happen. And if there are things that we need to bring back at our next learning community too, we can do that as well. So I think really this is a great way to sort of introduce this to. And I like the words we had today of sort of the idea that it's a normal process. So we've got great successes. The challenges are normal as well, and there are ways that we can work through them. Gavin, does that work with you?
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I was giving the thumbs up. Sorry.
Cool. Great. I'm going to turn it to Laura to do a very quick overview of Deliverable 4, and then we'll have Julie wrap us up with kind of the road ahead.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Gavin. That was really great information. I think it'll be really useful for this deliverable. So one quick note on Deliverable 3 before I jump into Deliverable 4. I know you're anxiously awaiting the email on the status of your deliverable. So on the next slide, this is the same as the last couple rounds. You'll get one of 3 emails from us. So we're working on these. It's taken a little bit longer, maybe because we're also reviewing your budget. So expect to see an email on the status next week. And then on the next slide, I'll pretty much skim this because I think you all are very familiar with the process at this point. Just know that we know everybody's really burdened right now responding to COVID, and just please keep in touch, even if it's a quick email because you haven't done the form to say that you're going to be delayed, just letting us know that your deliverable is going to be delayed. That's just helpful to kind of keep track of everybody. So next slide, of course, a team approach we've really encouraged throughout this process. This Deliverable 4 maybe is even more important to have a team approach than any of the others, because we really want to hear both sides and both voices of the campus and community partners as you sit down together, look at what challenges might come up and how you can address them. So please work on that together. Next slide. Deliverables, same as before, where you'll do your team form, and then your kind of core deliverable this time is a conflict identification and resolution plan, where you'll think through anything that's come up already that you've resolved and how you've done it. You'll have a list of potential challenges, so a lot of the things that Gavin just talked about. So hopefully that'll be helpful as you think through future challenges and kind of plan to address them. Plan what communication style and methods you're going to use. And then, of course, you'll reflect on it. We have the optional or highly suggested peer conference, and then submit that all by February 11th. So that's it for me. The next slide is just a real quick where we've been and where we're going. So you all are getting close to being wrapped up with your final project plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Julie.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. If we can move into the next slide. So just to follow up with what Laura showed on her last slide and where we're at. So we're coming towards the end of phase 1, and that'll wrap up at the end of February. You should have received already your first disbursement of that $10,000 initial fund allotment. And then that second round will come on February 20th. And then we'll move into phase 2 and look at what that is going to be from a budget perspective a little bit more, and what activities are going to be required. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, that second disbursement of phase 1 will be coming on February 20th. If you're finding that you need to carry over some of those phase 1 funds into phase 2, that's not a problem. Please just let us know, call that out if you haven't already on your budget as carryover funds, and we're happy to transition them over. In phase 2, we'll also be looking at dispersing funds in 2 installments, or 2 disbursements, if you will. Once we have the plans approved, the budget's approved, which is, of course, Deliverable 3 that you'll be receiving some feedback on, we'll go ahead and get that process rolling. Your first scheduled disbursement for phase 2 funding will occur at the end of April, and that will be $20,000. And then the other disbursement will be scheduled at the end of July, to total $40,000 for that phase 2 period. Keep in mind that throughout phase 2, although we're transitioning from learning communities, we will be working with the Ocam coaches. I'll get a little bit into that, what that's going to look like. But please know that you'll be able to continue to receive technical assistance, and there will be networking opportunities. And if you find you're in a situation where you need some direct assistance, you can always reach out to me, and I'll make sure we get you to where you need to go. Next slide, please. So phase 2, when we're looking at those required activities, and keep in mind that doesn't begin until April. Good thing to know, and I think this is something that probably nobody feels like they get these days, is a break. But in March, we will not be meeting or having anything that is required. There might be some catch-up activities that occur, but really there will be a little bit of a lull in March to allow us to kind of catch our breath. And then we'll resume phase 2 again in April. We'll continue on our same schedule, meeting the 3rd Thursday of each month, starting in April. And that'll go April through the end of August. Again, same time as the learning community meetings, and those will be on a monthly basis. The way that we'll coordinate those meetings will be the first 30 minutes will really be dedicated to some information. So education, best practices, and then that last hour will be dedicated to coaching. Again, if your coaching needs are not met within that monthly meeting and you feel like you need additional assistance, that will be available to you as well. And then, of course, the monthly webinars will continue with the same schedule. I promise they won't be every Wednesday, even though I see I'm having Wednesdays up here, but they'll continue on the same schedule as they are right now. I believe it's the 3rd Wednesday or 2nd Wednesday of the month from 1:30 to 3:30. And we'll continue to update you on what those are. Please keep in mind that those monthly webinars, although those are required activities for this group, they certainly are open and available to others who would like to attend. And then looking at the end of the grant celebration, that will be on September 15th. Who knows? We're hoping it will be in person. Time will tell, but please hold that date out because we definitely will be celebrating all the hard work you've been doing. Next slide. Okay, so before we transition onto just some of that final administrative stuff, I want to just open it up if there are any just broad or general questions as it might relate to budgets or phase 2. Either drop those in the chat or just call them out if you feel comfortable doing so.
Quick question, just in terms of phase 2 funding, when I know like a lot, just kind of thinking about getting the wheels turning in terms of like what implementation we can do in this sort of as we ramp up for that's the intervention to implement in phase 2. What is sort of the likelihood that we'll receive that funding, and how will, like, in terms of and maybe you can't give that direct of an answer, but like how would we know sort of where we are with the status of that receiving that funding for phase 2?
Okay, so the work that you've been doing to this point, and then deliverable 3, we're really looking at deliverable 3 to make sure that that is shored up, that we are all on the same page, that the use of funds are intended to be the way that they need to be. So, keeping in this process, you can be assured that you're going to receive those funds, right? That they will be released to you at the end of April and then again at the end of July. So, there's no magic carrot that we're hanging out and then you need to do this too. I promise you, it's really integrated into the process, and completing that deliverable 3, looking at that budget, is really our way of setting you up so that you're successful moving forward. Thanks for the question.
I'd like to ask, so for the last deliverable, we got the go-ahead, but no comments, which, it was great to get the go-ahead, but it was also we assume nothing was perfect on there, right? So even, can we get some comments on deliverable 3, even if it's yes, moving forward, here's some areas that you still might want to consider, or, this is a particular strength, focus on that. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, Laura, I'll let you pipe in on that if you don't mind.
I see Matt nodding, so let's hear what Matt's thinking.
Yeah, I think absolutely we will do our best. I think we've been scrambling a little bit, so we haven't been able to do quite as much as we would have liked, but I certainly see the importance there with the plans, and also then with the budgets. So we'll work on that. I can't promise we can turn it immediately, but we will do our absolute best. What you may get is an email saying that everything's okay, and then we'll follow up behind with comments, but we'll do our best. So absolutely, it makes sense.
So I'll ask a question kind of on that same regard real quick. If we weren't able to get the financial person's signature yet, should we wait until we get your feedback and then send it to them for their signature in case we need to do any updates? Or do you want us to get a signature with our current budget and then have to potentially go back to them and get a second signature? It's just a process going through all of these folks. So I just want to make sure that we're not wasting any time and duplicating steps if we don't need to.
My sense would be, I know Prevention First is going to review the budgets and stuff. So I think let's work through that process. So hang tight just a little bit, and then we'll get back with you. And certainly we want to make sure that we're not having you repeat work and go through processes that take time if we don't have to. So absolutely.
These are great questions. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, please know that you can reach out to me at any time. I'm always in your inbox weekly, so feel free to respond, however we can help, and no question is a bad question. Laura, can we go ahead and advance the slide? Is that Laura Amanda? All right. So, just to throw back a lot of these things that you guys already know, I do want to call out that Rise and Thrive initiative website. And sometimes we have a hard time getting into Google Drive. Please note that this suicideprevention.ohio.gov has a lot of those things that if you're having trouble accessing, and you're not able to with your VPN, that you can do so there. Next slide, please. We'll continue those drop-in calls. Please note that you can join either one of those links, and Matt is always available for one-on-one technical assistance. I know sometimes it's hard to make those drop-in calls, especially with what's going on. Please know that you can reach out to us for a one-on-one technical assistance session. Work slippage forms, we received some of those this time around, and we most certainly understand that is going to occur. Our only ask is just give us a heads up. Let us know if you feel like you're falling behind. It allows us to just kind of make note of it and make sure that we keep you on board and keep you posted. But we'll make sure that we work with you to get the work done eventually. Next slide. Webinars coming up. Our next webinar is Wednesday, February 9th. I believe Donna called out on my email. Thank you so much. And I happened to put it in twice, February 8th. I promise it's still Wednesday, February 9th. You can click that link to register, and that'll also be on your agenda. And next slide. CEs, we will follow up with an email like we do a weekly email. I'll make sure I put that evaluation link in the email. It's also in the drop-in or in the chat. So thanks so much for posting that. If you need other venues for CEs, just reach out to me, and if we're able to, we'll do that. Last slide. Okay, last but not least, we're always here. Know that there's no wrong door. We're here to answer your questions. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being at this meeting. We appreciate your time and know that your time is limited. So thank you. It's 4:30. We appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Feel free to drop off as needed or stay on if you have a question. Take care.